And so what we find is that here we have an image, if you could see it very well, of these angels saving Lot. Because it says that the men began to push against Lot, pushing him up against the door. That's what the previous verses said. So hard that they were about to break the door down with his body. That's what was going on. So in verse 10 of chapter 19, it says, "But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out, groping for the door." So we've got these men. I forgot to turn my fan on, believe it or not, that are trying to get in the door to get to these two angels. They don't know that. They think they're men and can't. And they're about to break the door down. And then the angels open the door, reach out, grab him, yank him inside, shut the door before they can get in, and then strike him with blindness. One of the things that's a little curious about this is you would think that God would just kill them. But he doesn't, because the angels are there to bring a specific judgment from God. And everybody's going to suffer that same judgment. And that's why they're just blinded. They can't do anything now. They've been stopped. And they're not going to be alive very long anyway, because very shortly the angels are going to bring down the fire from heaven that's going to utterly destroy not just Sodom and even Gomorrah, that entire valley that they're in, where nothing will ever be able to live there again, ever. And that's what happens next. But they pull them in, and these guys, they're all blinded. And what's interesting to me about this is, you'd think they'd start like screaming and going crazy, "I can't see, I can't see," and then realize nobody can see. You think that might get your attention. And you'd say, maybe we shouldn't mess with these guys. Because, it's not common for everybody to go blind all at once. Not only that, but they don't give up. It says they keep trying to find the door until they're so exhausted they can't look anymore. But God made sure they couldn't find it to get in. But that takes a while. So that means they kept at it, even though they were blind, didn't stop it. They kept trying. And so it gives you an idea. To me, that gives us an idea of how far they've fallen morally, that they are so determined to do this. And remember last week, Lot offered him his daughters, and they rejected that idea. And so it just gives us some idea of how bad it is and why God has to destroy them. Okay, then in verses 12 and 14. "Then the men said to Lot, 'Have you anyone else here? Sons-in-laws, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city, bring them out of the place.'" So basically they're saying, Lot, anybody that you care about, anybody that you're good friends with, we'll save them too, because they know you. You just have to go tell them, is what's going on here. Verse 13, "For we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, so his daughters were both pledged to be married, who were to marry his daughters, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. Now, this gets really interesting to me, because it said, how many of the men of the city were at the door? All of them. Well, he's got two sons-in-law. So where were they?
Apparently at the door.
At the door. Absolutely. And it was their wives-to-be that were offered to all of these men. I just find this such a weird situation. Yeah. Just such a messed up situation. Let me get a thing here. So he goes out and, well, this means that these husbands, they were bisexual as well. They have to be. Because they're going to marry his daughters, but they're with the men out there screaming for the two guys, the two angels. So, and Lot had no problem with them marrying his daughters. I would have a huge problem with this. But he had no problem with marrying his daughters. That gives us some idea of, this is what always happens when Christians live close to sin. It's not the Christians' values that pull the sinners up. How does it always go? They pull you down in almost every case. That's why God says, don't be unequally yoked. It is rare that the saved partner pulls the unsaved partner up to their level. It's almost always the other way around. It does happen, but it's rare. And usually not until after a lot of pain and suffering and turmoil. almost always the Christian gets pulled down. And that's what we have here. Lot, who was the Bible said was a righteous man, still he's been tremendously influenced by the immorality around him. Because it always happens, like even in modern days. You look at the TV and what they call PG-13, what would we have called that 50 years ago?
R.
Mm-hmm. And what they call R, what would we call that? X. Mm-hmm. And if you make the mistake of watching something that's strictly been made for the internet, it's X by itself. Absolutely. I mean, it's like lightweight pornography. I've made that mistake a few times. Oh, they've said this show is really good. So I start watching it and go, whoa, can't watch this one, because they just out and out show people having sex, and it's just amazing, Michael.
So when you were saying, about men and women getting together and one is in sin. Now, were you talking about just the homosexuality? Or
No. I'm talking about just a Christian and a non-Christian. That's it.
Really? So
the Bible says, do not be unequally yoked. It says to Christian men, don't date non-Christian women. Don't let that even be an option.
But most of the time, it'll pull the Christian out?
Almost always. Because is it easy to follow Christ?
No.
Is it easy to follow your own nature?
Yeah.
So guess what's going to happen?
Right. Yeah.
It takes an enormous amount of effort not to get pulled down. There's other part of the New Testament that says, and I like the way it puts it, it says, do not drift away. Because it's very rare that we Christians jump away from God. Like we love God one day and 2 weeks later we hate God and we're off doing our own thing. It's a drift. It's a very slow drifting away, a little at a time. That type of thing. Much more so than because Satan's smart. He knows better than try to hit us with some big thing. We'll balk at it. But if he sneaks it up on us, you know the old story about the frog. You throw a frog in boiling water, what happens? It jumps out. You put a frog in room temperature water and turn on the heat. By the time it gets so hot that he should jump out, he can't because he's so relaxed and he dies. And that's an extremely good picture of what sin does. It's a little here, a little there. And that's why we have to be so careful of, like in our family, we said we won't watch R-rated movies, things of that nature, because it's so easy for it to slip in. And if you went around today to churches and interviewed people about what they watch on TV, you probably don't want to know. I'm talking about Christians who go to church on a regular basis. We might be a little shocked to find out what a lot of people watch on TV. And it's just not good for us. Let's see. So this tells us Lot didn't really have a problem with the bisexuality. He's been influenced by his surroundings and the way he acts. We'll see as we go farther down, it's infected his whole family. He may not have participated, but at the same time, he doesn't seem to have a big problem with it. Because if he had a big problem with it, the homosexuality, the bisexuality, what would he have done? Move. Get out. Yeah, go somewhere else. Yeah. But he enjoyed the lifestyle too much of these very wealthy cities that had tremendous, they had good crops, they were cities, lots of people, and all the amenities that goes on with that. When we look at that area now, it's a blasted desert where nothing will grow. But the Bible says, remember, when we went back to Abraham and Lot, back then he was Abram and Lot, and he let Lot choose first. He said he went down by Sodom and Gomorrah because what was it like? Remember?
It was paradise.
Mm-hmm. It was like the Garden of Eden, like paradise. So that tells you it was a beautiful place with tremendous production of food and whatnot. And from what we can tell from archaeology, there were 4 or 5 cities all in close proximity that had at least 100,000 people each. So that means there had to be a lot of ability to grow food and irrigate and things of that nature, or rains. They came on a regular enough basis, either one. But yet, and then God wipes it off the earth. So he didn't have a problem with it, but it influenced him. And this is what happens if we intertwine our lives with unrighteousness. It will always influence us, no matter how hard we try. That's why we don't intertwine our lives. We can have friends that aren't Christians. We can, go to places to be involved with non-Christians, perhaps try to speak the gospel to them. But that's different than your life being intertwined with their life. That's very different. And that's what we're not supposed to do. Jesus went and he ate with the sinners and all that, but Jesus did not live with them nor intertwine his lives with them. The only people he intertwined his lives with were the 12 apostles. And then Mary and Martha and a few others, the people that followed him. So we have to be very careful of this. Now, Where am I? So yeah, he didn't have much of a problem. So he goes out and warns his sons-in-laws, and they thought he was joking. Who would joke about a city being destroyed? You know, especially with the fact that what just happened a few minutes ago was everybody went blind. You know, so there's a lot of supernatural stuff going on. And then he goes out and says, hey, the two guys in there are angels, and they're going to destroy the entire city and kill everybody in it. You guys need to leave. And they think he's laughing, and they're not going anywhere. They think he's joking, and they laugh, and they're not going anywhere. So this means they apparently could not have believed that the angels had caused their blindness. Now, I don't know what they would have attributed it to, but nonetheless, you know, that if they did that, they'd have thought, well, this God of his has tremendous power, we better listen. But they don't.
Did the angels actually like manifest in the physical form, or was it sort of?
They just look like humans.
They actually look like humans.
Yep, and angels in the Bible do that very, very, very often. They just look like regular humans. Sometimes they look like angels. Those are the times when people get scared to death and pass out, and, you know, to see what they really look like. That's why I hate the whole very effeminate image of angels, or the very, not that I have anything against women, or against the cherub angels. That's nothing like what the Bible describes an angel as. It describes them as a huge, powerful, fierce, scary warrior, often with huge swords and other kinds of weaponry, which is an interesting thing. I'm not sure why you need swords in the supernatural world, but they do. They have swords, and they do battle with the demons. We find that in Daniel, where they're doing actual battle with the demons. So let's see. Verse 15. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his two daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him. And they brought him out and sent him outside the city. So this again tells us Lot's got a strong connection to this city. I don't know the people, but at least the city, because he's just been told God's going to destroy this city. Get out. And what's he doing? Lingering, meaning he doesn't want to leave. In fact, the angels have to grab him, his wife and his daughters, and basically drag them out of town because they don't want to leave, even though imminent destruction is coming. And they know God can do what he says he can do, and that he will do what he says he will do. And because God cares so much, really, it's because God cares so much for Abraham. You'll find that a little lower in the scriptures, a little farther down, that he goes to so much trouble to save Lot and get him out of there. So we find more evidence that Lot was extremely comfortable. He was a righteous man, and the sin bothered him, but he was still comfortable living here. Otherwise, he'd have got out before, or definitely when these guys came. But he lingers instead of immediately getting out, and he has to be drug out. This is probably because life in the city was good. Life as a nomad is hard. You're moving all the time. You can't really have a lot of luxuries because you have to have only what you can carry on a camel and some donkeys. You know, you're usually not around other people, so there's not a lot of entertainment. You can't be close to even to other herdsmen because then there's not enough feed for all the animals. Yet in the city, there's entertainment. The food is much more easily gotten, you know, all different kinds of food that you can eat, whereas as a nomad, your diet's going to be much more restricted to what you can carry and what you can find, those kinds of things. There's a lot of social things going on. There's just a lot going. It's the same thing that draws people to the cities today. Why do people move to cities? A lot of them will tell you it's for entertainment, for sports, for all different kinds of reasons as to why they move from the country to the cities. And this has been going on since the beginning of time, that the people in the countryside gravitate to the large metropolitan areas. In fact, in the world today, isn't it still happening? All over, especially in underdeveloped countries. There's still people who are moving to the cities by the thousands and sometimes the millions because they see a better life there. Problem is, if everybody moves to the city, who grows the food? Right. You know, and all the other things, raises the animals, you got to have some left. And does everybody that moved to the city have a great life and make lots of money? No, there's by far the largest percentage are people who don't have a lot of money and barely survive in the cities. And as we discussed before, where does the predominance of sin occur? In the city, absolutely. Because also when you live out in the boonies, like if you're a nomad, you don't have a lot of free time. It takes all your time to get up and manage your animals and do all the work you have to do. You know, just like in the old days in farms in America. You got up when the sun came up, and you worked basically until the sun went down. You know, every day, 6 and sometimes 7 days a week. You don't have time to get in trouble, really. You know? So, there were a lot of advantages to living in the city. Friends, food, and social engagements, entertainment, safety. You had a wall around the city. You've got a garrison in the city. Most cities had their own army. That type of thing. When you're out as a nomad, you're on your own. It's up to you to protect yourself. All that kind of thing. So, and nothing's changed. Humans are still doing the same thing today. And it's funny, when you look at any science fiction show that's way in the future, where does everybody live? In huge cities. In fact, I was watching one this last week where the entire planet was one city. There was one spot on this entire planet where a rock stuck up out of the ground, and it's actually the peak of like a 12,000 foot mountain. That's how much the city's built up on the surface. And that's the only place you could touch the actual surface of the planet, was that one rock. And that's it. You know? Which makes, because most of these science fiction guys, they think everybody wants to live in a city. You know, and there's those of us who can't stand cities. I had a boss when I worked for Hughes Aircraft. To him, the perfect place was they were starting to design these buildings in big cities like New York where you never left the building. Your home was in the building, your job was in the building, the stores were in the building, everything was in the building. And you never had to leave unless you particularly wanted to. But you could go to theaters, whatever you wanted to do, is all in one building. And he was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. And he thought that was marvelous. And I'm like, that's a fate worse than death for a lot of us, you know. I would want no part of that in any way, shape, or form. But there's not that many of us. Most people prefer the cities and the other people around them, that kind of thing. When I see those pictures of New York where the people fill the sidewalks that you can hardly walk, oh my gosh, I'm like, I am so glad I'm not there. I'm moving in the sea of humanity, you know. It's amazing. But some people love it. All right, so here's Lot fleeing the city with his wife behind him, and the angels getting him out of town. Verse 17. And as they brought them out, one said, escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away. And Lot said to them, again, this gives us much more insight into what is going on in Lot's head and what he likes and why he wanted to stay in the city. Oh no, my lords! Behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Really? Behold, this city is near enough to flee to, and it's a little one. Just a little city, God. Let me go there, not the mountains, not the caves, not off by myself, and my life will be saved. He said to him, behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar, because Zoar means little. And it wasn't called Zoar before Lot went to it. It was called Zoar after, because it's little. And that's how he described it. So what he's saying is, well, this is a little city. It's not as bad as the big cities. Let me go there. So what you see is he was a nomad. He knows how to live that way. But what you're seeing here to me is he absolutely does not want to go back to being a nomad. Not to mention, what's he taking with him? What he can carry. And it's kind of rough to start over that way. Most likely, if you carried anything, what would you carry?
Water, food,
gold, and if you had it, so that you can start over. You're going to need money to start over. If you go to another town, you can use that money to start over, and it's the easiest to transport.
Yeah, that's what you meant, if they go in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Didn't they have any shoes in those days, or sandals?
Oh, I mean, most of the people went barefoot. I mean, they did have sandals and stuff, but you would find most people, or a lot of people, not most, went barefoot a lot of the time.
You do get callous there.
They may also be trying to show us how quickly they left. No, because the angel said, get out now. Now, not 5 minutes from now. Now. So he wants to go to this little city. Also, after God just saved your life, would you argue with God about where he told you to go?
No.
I wouldn't. And I think it's funny that Lot says, if I go to the little city, this disaster will overtake me. But the angels just said, we won't, if I go to the hills, the disaster will overtake me. And they've already said, no, it won't. That's why we're here. And we're telling you where to go, so that's got to be the safe place. But yet he argues with them. To me, that also shows a lot of arrogance. I hope I wouldn't argue with them, type of thing. But
I'm sorry for asking if I'm asking too many questions, but
No.
I'm so interested in this stuff. Right?
Nope.
Why would he be close to God, and then when God told him to do something, and it's going to be destroyed? Why would he argue with God at that time?
never said he was close to God. It said he was righteous. Big difference.
Oh, good do-gooder and all that stuff.
Job was close to God.
Oh.
Job was righteous, but not close to God. That's the whole point of the book of Job. At the end, Job is close to God. At the end of the book, Job says, I had heard of God, but now I've seen him.
Oh.
Now he has a close relationship.
Got it.
See, righteous in the Bible or blameless in the New Testament doesn't mean you're perfect. It means that you are outwardly living according to the rules of your belief. That's what it means. Because remember, before Jesus, all religion was external, not internal. Even the Jews, if you went to the temple, what did you do? You brought animals. It was all external, sacrifices. Yes, you were given commands of how to live, but there wasn't that close relationship because you can only have that relationship with God through Jesus. And Jesus wasn't here yet. Now, there were some people, the great prophets and others, who did have a close relationship with God, but they were very unique individuals, Abraham and a few others. But by and large, religion was all external. Every religion was external, pretty much. The only internal one is Judaism and then Christianity.
It's very important.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it's unfortunate to me that so many people don't read the book of Job, so many people don't teach the book of Job, and so many people have no idea what it's about, other than Job whines and complains for 40 chapters. And really, there's a lot of really powerful images and concepts in the book of Job. It's also considered the oldest of all the books in the Bible. That Job and the people he's talking about were very far back in time, farther than many of the other characters in the Bible. So, all right. Now, Lot's told to run for the hills where he'll be safe, and instead he talks him into letting him go down to Zoar. And they're also told, don't even turn around and look back. Okay? So, let's see. Trying to make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. All right. So, in case you're wondering where Zoar is, it's like Sodom and Gomorrah. We don't know for sure. But the signs make it seem like most likely it's down here just south of the Dead Sea. Along with Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other cities of the plain, they call it. That we looked at before. There's Sodom, Dead Sea. This is just an exploded view of that. And then here we've placed Zoar here. Gomorrah, probably there. Admah, Zeboim, and Tamar, those are some of the other cities of the plain. This is a part of it's called the Siddim Valley. It's also part of the Jordan Valley. The Jordan stops here at the Dead Sea. And so this was a very, very lush area, which means at that time, it's highly likely that the Jordan didn't stop in the Dead Sea, that it kept going. There was a river coming out to make this such a lush valley. Hard to say. So we've got Sodom, there's Zoar, that's where he's going. This area is going to be destroyed. God told him to go out here in the hills where he'd be safe. Out of the valley, because this entire valley, except for Zoar, is going to be destroyed. Not just Sodom and Gomorrah. Because all around big cities back then were villages and towns. And the city was where you fled. If an enemy attacked, you could go inside the city where you'd be safe inside the walls. But the food and everything has to be grown out here. And so there are towns and villages of farmers and whatnot that are outside. But even though they're not in the city, they're going to have the same morality as the people of the city. This whole area is completely corrupt and gone. And so God destroys it. Now, again, this tells us, for some reason I lost the picture on my phone. We'll see. Hopefully we're still recording. Let's see. Again, the whole Zoar thing reminds us that he likes living in the cities now. And although this is not God's plan, what's God's plan? Go to the hills. That's God's plan. This is where we see some of that limited free will. He says, can I go to Zoar? God says, that's not what I want, but okay. So he lets him go to Zoar. And so it's again that idea of that limited free will. Not total free will, but limited free will. So then, of course, the next thing that comes is this, the destruction of Sodom. Fire raining from the sky. So you know absolutely it's God. It's not an army. It's not anything else. It's God. End of story, because it's supernatural. So that's starts in verse 23. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. The Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. We're not told that you'd be made a pillar of salt. They were just told don't look back. But she does, which means she really doesn't want to leave. She looks back with longing, all that kind of stuff. God said don't look back, and God is serious about everything he says. So she gets turned into a pillar of salt. And believe it or not, there are people today that go there sometimes to try to find the pillar of salt that is his wife. And the funny thing is, would it be there?
No.
No, salt dissolves real easily in water. So if it rains at all, it's going to be gone. Not only that, wind and other things, animals, all kinds of stuff, it's gone. And I think I said it last week, it ranks right up there with somebody saying they have a piece of the cross Jesus was killed on, or they have the Holy Grail, the cup he drank out of. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. And yet, millions of people bought into that stuff, especially in the medieval ages. Almost every cathedral and church during medieval times had some kind of relic. And there were lots of people who made enormous amounts of money selling relics. Knuckle bones from this saint, toe bones from that saint. Just amazing to me that people would fall into this. Calvin, did you have a question?
I was going to say, has the wind blown?
Mm-hmm. But people do weird stuff and they believe weird stuff. It's always interesting to me. If you sit down and think for a moment, you'll go, that's not possible.
What about the shroud?
The Shroud of Turin?
Yeah.
That was basically proven to not be Jesus, if I recall right. I think it was proved to be a hoax. But even if it wasn't, there's no way you could prove it was Jesus.
Yeah, how do you do that?
You know, it might be a face of someone, but you know, do we know what Jesus looked like? Then how can we possibly know that's his shroud? My favorite is when somebody gives you a picture. This is Jesus, this is Mary. Really? How do we know? There's no pictures of them anywhere. We have no idea what they look like.
So were there other shrouds?
I don't know of any that were like that supposedly had an image transposed.
No, I know, but I
onto
mean, I was
them.
wondering if there was any others around.
Well, I mean, they put shrouds on every body. That was part of their embalming process.
But I mean,
the burial
a picture,
process.
a replica of taking a photo of something.
Yeah, all right. All I know is that we'll never know where Jesus was buried. We'll never find the Ark of the Covenant. None of that. Because what would happen if we knew the exact tomb Jesus was buried in?
Now that's
What would happen? What would people do? Worship the tomb.
Yeah.
Not the Jesus,
I get it.
the tomb. If they found the Ark of the Covenant, what would happen?
Same.
They'd worship the Ark of the Covenant, absolutely. Not the God of the Ark of the Covenant. You know, and that's why God's not going to let us have any of this stuff. Because that's what will happen. Guarantee it. It'll happen. Even in the Bible we find out. Remember when the serpents bit all of the Israelites and they all started dying because they refused to follow God's commands? And then God tells Moses to make the bronze serpent, put it on a stake, and if you look up, you'll be saved, and if you don't, you'll die. I'm a huge picture of the cross. Sin is the poison of the snakes. You know, it's a tremendous image. But you find a little later that particular thing is called Nehushtan, the image is, and it's worshipped by the Israelites. Exactly like I just said. If you found anything that actually belonged to Jesus or his tomb, it would be unbelievable the people that would worship the object and not the creator of the object.
Or somebody would make a lot of money charging for you to look
Yeah,
at.
right.
Oh, absolutely. My favorite is, because this happened a lot in Tucson, where in our neighborhood, a woman saw the face of Jesus in the bark on a tree. How do you know that's the face of Jesus? No one's ever seen him. It's alive. So it's something that their imagination thinks looks like Jesus in the bark of the tree. But yet people came from all over the country to our neighborhood to go to that house and look at the bark on that tree. You know, and sometimes people see Jesus in pancakes, potato chips, grilled cheese sandwiches.
Well, yeah.
Yet we have no idea what Jesus looked like. So how could you possibly know? You know? So, and what happens in every case? They worship the tree, the grilled cheese sandwich, the potato chip, the pancake, whatever it is, you know. So that's why God's never going to let it happen. So, where am I? All right, and it also tells us in 23 to 26, not only does he kill all the people, but it says, and what grew on the ground. God sterilized the entire area so no one could ever live there again. But that has a multiple purposes because it's in the land of Israel, right beneath the Dead Sea, correct? It's not the land of Israel at this point in time. But that's where it is. So later on, when Jewish children would say, Mom and Dad, why is that area so barren? He could say, because the people who lived there were so immoral, God killed them and destroyed and sterilized the land. God did that all over the land of Israel, remember? He had them set up monuments all over. So their children would ask, Dad, what's that monument? They could explain to them. So God literally built it into the structure of their entire nation, things that would cause children to ask about God. And it's the way it was supposed to work. Now, he destroys the entire valley. This is what we can still find there to this day. Those are balls of sulfur. And the only way they get to be balls like that is the same way sleet and all that gets to be round balls. It falls through the air. And nowhere else in this land, in this area, will you find these balls of sulfur laying all over the top of the ground. And that's what God said he did. He rained down sulfur and fire, which means burning sulfur, because sulfur burns. And when it burns, what does it give off? A noxious, deadly gas that blisters your skin, burns your throat, and if you're in it very long, will kill you. Besides the fire. Also, when sulfur burns, it gets soft and liquidy, so when it falls on you, what happens to it? It sticks. So you can imagine, it's not even fun to really try to sit down and think about how awful that would have been that this stuff fell and buried this whole area with it and killed everything. Man, women, children, plants, and nothing grows there to this day thousands of years later because the soil's full of sulfur. It can't. Sulfur doesn't allow plants to grow. It sterilizes the soils. So in some translations, you'll see the word brimstone. Brimstone's just an older translation of sulfur. And that's all it is. So I'm going to try something here, and we're going to see if it works. I don't know if it will work or not. There is a video in here.
So I'm up here on the site called locally Numera, and this is the site that the archaeologists associated with Gomorrah. So here you can see that ashy layer that's just underneath the surface. This is full of burned pottery. It's full of the fragments of human bones. The question is what evidence is there of this burning sulfur that rained down? Well, it seems that the culprit, these sulfur balls that are also found in this area. Well, I'm off on a camping trip. Today I'm driving down to the south.
Oh, this is just great.
You paused it.
I know. But of course, when I'm doing it at home, when I do this, it tells me how many minutes and seconds.
Yeah.
Because this one part I want to show you, that's all. But now it doesn't tell me. Oh, well.
East shoreline of the Dead Sea. And this is the area that the Bible calls the cities of the plain. It's also the area that has the archaeological sites that date to the time period of what's known as the early Bronze Age. And this is the time when Abraham and his nephew Lot lived. This is the time when the Bible says that the Lord destroyed the cities of the plain.
That's pretty much what the whole area looks like.
So I'm standing now at the largest of these early bronze sites on the...
How many plants do you see?
0.
And that goes for miles and miles and miles and miles in every direction. That's it. It's just buried.
Southeast side of the Dead Sea. This one locally is known as Babadra, and is the site that is associated with Sodom in the Bible. It was discovered as an early bronze site back in 1924. It was excavated in the 1960s and 1970s. And what archaeologists found here was this burn destruction that goes across this site. This city came to an end through a fire destruction. So here you can see this ashy burn destruction layer just underneath the surface. It's full of human bone fragments, burned pottery, and it's covering the entire site. So off in the distance here, you can see Babadra, identified as Sodom, and then right here to the southwest is this massive cemetery that you can see with
See all the
these
holes?
pits that mark its boundaries, and these are formed because of the locals for decades have been coming and digging into these graves looking for antiquities to sell on the antiquity market. And so it's estimated from the archaeologists that dug here back in the 60s and the 70s that there are around 500,000 people buried in this cemetery. And it's just staggering. And what's really intriguing then is that they found a burn destruction across the cemetery that happened at the same time that the city was destroyed. So the city and the cemetery were destroyed in the same fire disaster. And there's no reason why an army would attack a bunch of graves and burn a cemetery. And so this was one of the major reasons that they interpreted the destruction here as being caused by a natural disaster. In the excavation report, they show pictures of the bones in the graves that were warped by the heat.
The heat was so intense it warped the bones.